All right, so let's create a new app. I'm going to call it Django Polls, and we're going to create all the pieces for it. We're going to create the models, the views, the URLs, the templates, and get that all working together. Then we're going to add in some CRUD capability so that the user has the ability to add and manipulate data rather than us as a developer being the only ones that can, touch the data or edit it. So here, I'm going to start a new project. I've not done any of this just to give us a quick review, but we should be pros at it by now. So I'm going to do Python -m -v. I'm going to create a virtual environment named .venv. Give that a run. Again, we've done this probably dozens of times by now, so you guys should be pros at this process. We want to create the virtual environment and then get into our virtual environment. So it's bin/activate on a map. All right, I'm in my virtual environment. Great. Probably a good time to create a git ignore since I forget that many times. Git ignore. I want to ignore my virtual environment. We do not want to commit our virtual environments to our GitHubs. They tend to be pretty large and are unnecessary to commit. So I'll add that there. What else? All right. So I got my virtual environment. I need to install a few items. I'm going to do pip install Django. I'm also going to install Psycho PG2. So I'm going to add them with a space. They should install in a few seconds. I think Psycho PG takes a little longer, but we're going to download the required libraries. In this case, Django and Psycho PG. Probably should do a pip freeze and create a requirements.txt file once this is complete. So let's let that do its thing. Maybe another 2 seconds, 3 seconds. All right, Psycho PG's done. What else you got to do here? Okay, so now that we installed everything, we should do a pip freeze into requirements.txt. All right, so we want to spy on that quickly. I'm going to open my requirements.txt file. Cool, got some versions that are going to be tied to my project. All right, those are boring steps. Let's actually create our Django project. So to do that, I need to run Django-admin, start project. I'm going to name this polls_proj, and then put a period after it so that I don't get nested folders. There we go. So we got our manage.py file with our all-important manage.py file, and also our project folder that has settings and URLs and other items. I'm also going to create my app. So I'm going to do Python manage.py start app and call that polls app. All right, so I get a new app folder here. I'm also going to create a database. So create DB, spell it polls DB. All right, looks like I already have that database. So we'll go with a different name, polls DB2. All right, so I've done those steps in my terminal. And I'm going to go to my settings file in my project. And the two things we need to do, always remember, add in our app. So in this case, polls_app. And then we want to add in our database. So SQLite is not what we want. We want PostgreSQL. And the database name I gave it, if I remember correctly, was polls_db2. All right, so that's all set up. Cool. What next? So we got our project up and running. We could run our server if we want to. Python manage.py run server. Hopefully I don't have anything running on this port. Yep, so we have unapplied migrations. If you remember, Django has some migrations that wants us to run on our database, but our server should be up and running. So if I go to localhost 8000, great. So this rocket ship means everything is fine with our server. Let's get into the actual meat of our project, which is going to our app and adding models. So this is the first step I usually do to set up my models, create my data schema here. So we're going to create a couple of models. Let's go with a question. So it's going to be a Q&A, like we add a question, add some choices, and our users can fill them out. We need to inherit from model. Don't forget that, else your functionality will not work. Question text will be one of our fields. Let's make that a char field. And let's go max length. Let's say 128. We don't want to get too greedy with the text. All right, that's what I'm going to have for my questions model. I'm going to have a choice model. Models.model. And so these two models are going to relate to one another. And so we need to figure out that relationship. So I'm going to have a choice text, and we'll make that models That char field, let's say choices can only be 64 characters. All right, so the question is, what is the relationship between question and choice? So again, this is just like a multiple choice questionnaire. Can one question have more than one choice? What do you guys think? I see some nods. Yep. Yeah. So on that side, question and choices, one question can have many different choices. Can one choice be applied to multiple questions? Now this gets a little tricky. Like, sure, you might have the same answer for two different questions, but they should be treated independently because again, we're gonna be keeping track of like some data. I think in this case, we want to keep track of the number of votes that each choice has. So like, even though like Apple might be the same choice for two different questions, they should be unique entries in our choice table. So I'm gonna say one choice cannot be used for multiple questions. So in this case, we have a one-to-many relationship. So let me create my votes. It's gonna be an integer field. And that's cool. All right, so as we talked about, there's a relationship here. We're gonna relate to the question model. So we're gonna have a question field, and this is gonna be models.foreign key. Because it's a one-to-many, we use a foreign key for a one-to-many. So here we need to specify a few items. We need to tell it what model are we relating to. So we're in the choice model. So we want to point to the question model. The other required parameter is on delete. Basically, it's saying, hey, if we delete the parent question, what should happen to all the choices that are tied to that parent question? The usual one I go with is just models.cascade, which means if the parent gets deleted for some reason, all the choices that are associated with it should also get deleted from the choices model. So do models.cascade. The third optional parameter, but highly recommended, if you ask me, is the related name. So if you remember from our discussion yesterday, this is how the opposite side will refer to this data. So in this case, I'm gonna make the related name choices, plural, because this effectively is kind of saying I have an imaginary field here called choices that I have access to. I am not gonna create this field explicitly. This foreign key relationship will allow me to access choices from a questions instance, from a question instance. I'm going to pause there. I want to make sure everyone understands how this foreign key is working and what the related name is doing. Okay, so again, we should have access to all the choices for a single question based on this foreign key, which exists only in the choice model. All right, good thing to do here is probably add my Dunder string methods because I usually forget them and they are good to have for anything front end facing. So let's create those quickly. We're going to return f string. In this case, I'll say question is going to be self.question text. Got a typo right there. Okay, so question that, and then I'm going to have the same thing for my choice. Choice here and choice text. All right. So we got our models done, nothing too complicated on here, just kind of keep it simple. We have one foreign key relationship, a little bit of data, nothing too exciting. I saw a hand raise, I don't know if it went down. Lyman?
So in your string, could you, since you're creating the relationship between the choices and questions, could you print out the choices for each question also from the question class?
Yeah,
possible?
We have access to choices, so we should be able to do that.
Well, that might be a good way to show by you creating that related name field, how that might actually look.
Yeah, so we're gonna need to access self.choices. I'm gonna hold off on that. I will try it in 1 second. I just wanna proceed here. But yeah, let's just print out the question text, choice text. All right, so now let's actually make our migrations. So since I made some model changes, in this case, I added some models, I gotta do Python manage.py make migrations. So this is gonna take my models, create a migrations script. It's okay, so notice I'm creating 2 models. That seems like what I wanted. And then I want to migrate. So this is gonna push both all the default migrations that Django wants to add to my database and any of my migrations I just created. So if I do Python manage.py migrate, hit enter, it's gonna list out everything it's running. Cool, that seems like it went well. All right, so now we should have a question model and a choice model. I'm going to jump to adding some data from the developer side. So to do that, my favorite way to do it is through the admin panel. So 2 steps required. One thing is we need to go through our admin.py file, and we need to register all of our models we want to expose to the admin panel. So for here, I need to import from models, import all my models, asterisks. I could, and then I could do admin.site.register, and then all the models I want to register here. So I had a question model and a choice model. All right, so that's step one. To get to admin panel working, we need to register our models in the admin py file within our app. Step two is creating a super user. This is like an admin user that has access to the admin panel. To do that, I need to go to my terminal, type in python manage.py, create super user, all one word, run enter. I'm going to give my super user a name. I'm going to call him admin, password, super secret password. That's not secure, but I don't care. All right, so that admin user should have been created. My models got registered. So now, given these two steps, I should be able to go to my browser, go to localhost/admin. So that is a default route that exists. So I'm going to do login with my credentials. And there we go. So choices and questions are my models. There are groups and users used for authentication. Probably will be covered next week when Raphael talks about authentication within Django, but these are the models I'm worried about. Let's actually add some data really quickly. Anyone have a question they want to ask? All right, Andrew, question?
When we're putting stuff in here, does it go directly into the database?
Yes. Yep. All right, I guess, sorry, I did mean, sorry, I meant questions for us to add here, but if you do have any questions about what we're doing, that's totally valid too. But let's say, who will win the NCAA tournament? I am not a college basketball fan, so you guys are going to help me here. Tournaments. That's spelled correctly. All right, so that's our first question. Let's add another question right now. Anyone got a question we want to ask?
Sure. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood?
All right, it's a long question. How much wood would woodchuck chuck if all right, hopefully this doesn't exceed my 128 limit. Chuck if a woodchuck, that one word, I don't even know, could chuck wood. All right, hopefully that's less than 128. How much wood would a woodchuck? All right, save. All right, cool, that fit within our bounds. Let's ask one more question. Anyone got a question we want to ask our audience? All right.
Oh, what's the question?
Oh, we're just gonna create a question. So I'm gonna say, what is the best dessert? All right, so that's gonna be our 3 questions. We're seeding our database with these questions. Let's add some choices. So let's do this quickly. Again, I'm not an NCAA basketball fan, so can someone tell me one of the favorites? I know Gonzaga is probably one of them. Gonzaga.
Auburn.
Baylor.
Votes will be 0. All right, so I heard some responses. So we'll do, what was it? Baylor?
Baylor, yeah.
Start with 0 votes for all of these. Full NCAA tournament. I heard Auburn, I think. What seed is Auburn? Are they a top seed? I don't think they are.
They are the team Charles Barkley's rooting for. That's all I know.
Gotcha.
It's
All right.
Alabama.
Let's add one.
Alabama.
Competition.
Roll Tide, roll
All right.
Tide.
Let's add Alabama to get that that competition within that state. So 0. All right, we'll have 4 choices. I'm not going to go too crazy with this, so I'm going to hit save. All right, so those are our choices for our first question. Let's add choices for our next question. So question, how much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? I'm going to say, I don't know, will be one of the responses. Another response, I'm just going to do this quickly. Let's just say 42 would be another answer. And then add choice. Ask the woodchuck might be an answer. Why would we answer when the woodchuck can answer for himself? All right, and let's get one more response. Anyone else have a response for how much wood a woodchuck could chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood?
A woodchuck would chuck as much wood as a woodchuck would chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood.
Much as it wants. I'm going to shorten it to as much as it wants. Okay, so I'm going to say that. All right, so we have 4 options there. We don't have to be limited to 4, but I'm just going to go with 4 just because that's a nice number. Last question, what's the best desserts? Definitely donuts should be in there. So we'll put donuts. Anyone have any suggestions for competing against donuts? You're going to lose against donuts, but you guys can try. I guess cheesecake would be donuts in my world.
Ice cream.
Ice cream, certainly popular choice. Best dessert. Any other suggestions?
Mochi.
Mochi, okay. I've not had.
Bagels.
What was that?
Let's go with bagels.
That was a very cultured
I'm not gonna
answer,
accept
Andrew.
bagels and dessert. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I don't know, man. You can,
Alright,
you can
fine.
put some delicious
We'll
things
add
on
it in.
bagels.
We'll see if they get any votes. But okay. So which best dessert? So again, we have some choices. We could add more choices, but you guys can get the idea here. This was seeding our database, so we have some data to work with. Cool, nothing too exciting, but our admin panel, nice handy way that Django gives us access to our data. Okay, so we did our models. We added some data in our database. Let's get to the other steps to get this kind of up off the ground. As I said, I'm going to expedite a few of the items, but let's do our views. So views, I'm going to create a few views here. It's going to be a little different than what the curriculum page has because I have certain design in mind, but I'm going to do, let's say, question list will be one of my views. That takes in the requests object. Remember, that always has to be there. And let's pass right now. I'm going to do a def question detail. So this is where we actually view the question and maybe the choices. And then I'm going to have one more view, call it def question edits. All right, I'm just going to kind of stub these out so that I know what I want to create eventually. I don't have to create them right now. All right, so let's focus on one by one. First, I'm going to do question list. I just want to have some page that shows all the questions in our system, and then maybe we can add some links to that page. So here we want to implement some functionality. So I need to tie in my models. So I'm going to import from models, import question and choices. So my question list should use all the questions in my database. So I need to set up a render. So I'm going to return render. If you remember, render takes in 3 parameters. It's the request object, the template we want to render. So I'm going to eventually create pages / question underscore list.html. And then the third optional parameter is if you want your template to use any data, you want to send your template any data, you need to send that as a third parameter. So I'm going to create a dictionary called my data. And I'm going to add in something to my data. Let's call it all questions. So all questions is the key. The value is going to be question.objects.all. We want every single question in our database. So we're going to use our Django query to get all the objects from that model. Any questions about what we're establishing here? Okay, so again, much of this should be review where we render something by passing in the template name and the data. In this case, the data is going to be from our database, which are the questions stored in there. So now we need to create this template. So question list is what I called it. If you guys remember, hopefully you guys haven't forgotten, we must create a function or folder called templates. Must be named that because Django is going to look for this folder. I'm going to create a folder within that, which I'm going to name. I'm going to call it pages. That's my choice. You guys can name, create a folder that's named something else. Here, I'm going to create a new file and call it question list.html. And just to expedite this a little bit, I'm going to create, let's actually create a base template here, base.html. So that I could reuse some functionality. So my base is going to look like something pretty generic. In fact, I have a snippet for it. So I'm going to use it. So I have a title section, I have a header section, and a main content section. My question list can extend that. Django extends. All right, so these are the sections I need to fill in from that base. So I probably want a title. We'll say polls homepage as my title. Header can be polls question. And then content, this is where we actually should loop over our data. So again, we're passing in something called all questions. So we should have access to that variable in our template. So if we want to display it, sorry, I have too many files open. Let's get rid of some of them. We don't need admin. We don't need init. We do want views. All right. So question list, we need to do a for loop here. So let's do that together. We probably want a header. That's or an ordered list. And then we want a for loop in here. So use our Django syntax or Django templating syntax for question in all questions. Make sure we end our for block. This is just part of the syntax for Jinja. So end for, and then in here we create a bunch of list items, not lil, list items, and let's create hyperlinks as well. If I'm going too quickly, please let me know. These should have some content in them. So let's go with, we need question text is the field one display. And the link, I'm going to use the named routes. So I'm going to say URL should go to question detail. And then we need a question ID passed to it. So again, we're using Django routing with the name so that, again, that makes it more flexible. So I'm going to create a route that is named question dash detail eventually. I've not created that yet. Otherwise, we're just going to show the question text, allow them to click on it. I think there's some other things I want to add here. So we'll do that in a second, I guess. Elon, you have a question?
For your A tag, do you need quotation marks for your URL? Just making sure.
These, yes, these you do need. All attributes are going to be a string for HTML. Think about here.
Oh, like outside the curly bracket.
Yes, outside you do need them.
Okay, thank you. Just
Yep. All right, so here, let's see if this actually works. So if I save this, let's get to page. All right, so obviously that doesn't work because I forgot my URLs. That was step 3 or 4, whatever. So I go to my project. Let's tie in our app URLs and our project URLs. So here I need to add a path. Let's call that path polls. It's going to includes the function I'm going to use, include the name of my app, which is polls_app.urls. And I need to include this function. All right, so I'm basically telling my project to redirect and look in my app URLs. I need to create my app URLs. So let me copy what I have here, create a new file called urls.py in my app. I'm going to copy what I had in my project URLs and modify this. So we'll have the home page will be nothing extra. We'll need to include the view. So from current directory, import views. So this should give us access to anything that the views.py file has. So in this case, we had a function called views question list. And I'm going to name this route question dash list. Okay, so we have one route that's going to be handled by this view handler. And hopefully, if everything's wired correctly, we should be rendered this template page. All right, let's see. Hopefully I didn't miss a step there, but a lot of steps to go through. That's not what I want.
Don't you have to go to polls?
What was that?
Don't you have to go to polls because that's what you put your URL as?
Yeah, it seems like there's an error. Polls app URL is not found. Oh, this happens when you add new files. So I'm gonna have to quit my server and then restart it. I've seen that before. So if I refresh now, you're right. I should get this message telling me, hey, no route exists at this place, but we need to go to /polls. So I go to /polls. Question detail not found. Okay, that's my mistake. So I referenced, if you remember my template right over here, I referenced the name route. Django is not finding that name route in my URLs. So that is why it's complaining. So I could add that in, even though I have no actual route to go to right now. So it's going to be question detail, and the name is going to be question detail. So again, definitely get good at reading error messages. This says reverse for question detail not found. That clued me into, hey, this route probably doesn't exist, and Django is complaining about it. So I refresh now, question detail. What happened there? Oh, I guess I'm getting too ahead of myself. So question detail needs to take in a question ID. So let's see if that satisfies it. All right, so I guess we gotta do the whole part. So question detail, we want a route here that says maybe question slash some integer value, and we'll call that question ID. So again, the value I'm putting in here must match the value that is being accepted right here. Okay, so it looks like Django won't let me do it halfway. All right, there we go. So now that we have, the route that we're gonna link to eventually, obviously if I click on these, there's no template we're rendering, but we have our questions that are coming from our database. Who will win the NCAA tournament? How much woodchuck would a woodchuck chuck? And what is the best dessert? All right, so we are able to do this. Seems great. All right, so that's our question list. I want to do some CRUDing right now. So I think we're doing okay on time. So this is a cool page. We list our questions. But now, what if I want to let the user add a new question? As in, they are using my site. They are not going to be granted access to my admin panel. They don't have access to my database. They're not going to do any querying or inserting of data. They are going to interact with my web page. I want to provide them a way to add new questions to our database in the backend. So let's actually do this just on this page. I can create a separate page for it, but for my choice, I'm going to create it on the same page. So in my template, I'm going to provide the functionality here. So let's add a horizontal rule. I'm a huge fan of them. And then we're going to add a form. So form is a good way to capture user input. So we're going to have a form. The method for this form is going to be post. So again, just a refresher, when I go to this page on my own, that's a GET request. When I submit some data via a form, that's going to be a post request to the same URL. And I distinguish between a GET and a post based on the method I specify right here. So the form will send a post when the user submits it. I'm going to kind of expedite this just because I don't want to make typos and I don't want to take up valuable time. So this is what my form is going to look like. Important thing here, don't forget your CSRF token. I honestly forget it at least 50% of the time when I'm kind of coding on my own. Don't forget your CSRF token. If you do, Django will yell at you and say, hey, you need a token. Here, we're going to allow the user to enter in a new question. And then we're going to submit that question with this button. If there's an error, I'm going to also display the error within that form. We'll kind of see how this works. So we have a form, nothing too exciting. If I refresh my page, there's my form. So new question, user can enter a question here. Fortunately, I don't know how to resize this. I'm sure there's some HTML way to make this bigger. I can make it a text field, but I'll leave it as is. So if I add a question, let's say, what is the best color? Add question. Well, I add question, my page refreshed, but nothing happened with that data. The data was sent to my server. My server was not ready for it, and it just ignored it, which is fine. Nothing crashed, but that data was thrown away. So we need to actually capture that data on the server side, process it, and then actually save records in our database. So to do that, we need to spy on the post method for this URL or for this route. So if we go back to my views, this is my GET request. The default is a GET request. This is what happens when a GET request comes in. I want to do something different for a post request. So for a post request, I'm going to ask, hey, request.method, are you equal to post? I know this question was asked before and it's worth mentioning. In HTML, the case of this does not matter. I can write post lowercase, uppercase, whatever case I want. On the Django side, the case of this matters. So this must be uppercase on Django side. So request equals post. Let's do some processing over a form. So with a post, there should be, I should have access to some post data. So whatever the user sent. So here I'm going to do a try. I'm going to say, let's get the question ID. So let's create a new question. Then we're going to get the question text is going to be from the user. So question text, we're going to get it from the request.post. This is a dictionary that should have question as a key and a value pair. Where does this come from? That's coming from our form. So if I go back to my question list, I know I did this kind of quickly. I gave the name of question right here. So that is how I'm extracting the value from Django side. So the name field on your input values is how the data dictionary will be built when the form is sent. So if I name this again donuts, I would extract this value via donuts. This has no impact or this is not affected by anything I'm doing on Django side. This is from my HTML page. All right, so this gives me the question text, what the user entered. And then I try to do a full clean. So this is where a full clean comes in play. Always make sure you validate your data before you attempt to save it. All right, so that's why I'm doing a try catch, because if full clean happens to throw an error, or maybe, maybe my form did not send a question value, like some of these operations could raise an exception. So I'm trying to be safe here and wrapping it with a try and accept. Accept. I can spell that. To say exception as E. And then I'm going to do something a little different here. Since I have a data dictionary, I'm going to store that error in my data dictionary and say, hey, there's an error. Set that equal to E. Actually, I'll do value error, validation error as VE, and I want to store the dictionary here. So we'll do VE message dictionary. There was a hand raised at some point. Lyman.
Yeah, so so you can put this post method inside the same request method, because when you submit the post, it refreshes the page and it's re-triggering that same function again, right?
Yep, you got it. So when I hit this button right here, it's sending a post request back to this URL. So this URL maps to my question list view handler. So in that case, I'm going to say, hey, did we get a post? Great, we're going to do this stuff. If we didn't get a post, we're just going to do this stuff. Yep. All right. So we have a try catch, do some validation. If there's an error, I'm going to add to my data dictionary. And the reason I'm doing this is because I'm going to sneak in, I already snuck it in, sorry, right here. If we have an error, we're doing some conditional rendering here. If error is a non-null value or non-none value, we're going to show that error in some paragraph here. So if you remember, for our models, this field should be non-nullable, right? So if the user enters a blank question, that should trigger when we go to do full clean. Full clean should trigger and say, hey, you're not allowed to add a blank value. The model specifies that you can't add a blank value, so we should get an error. And then that error should be shown in our template right here, because I'm allowing a variable called error, and I'm going to show it if it's not null. So let's give this a try, and now let's see what happens with our post. So the post, if it's valid, should save our record, and then we're going to get our questions after the fact. So we're going to re-get our questions and then show all those questions here. Let's try with an error. Let's enter no value. I'm going to add question. Notice we get some error message. Obviously, it's not the best user formatted way, but it says question text. This field cannot be blank. Cool. So that's some feedback to the user, not the best feedback. Well, let's add an actual question. Someone got a question we want to add to our database here? Okay. What is the best, let's say, what is the worst season? All right, so that's my question. What is the worst season? Add question. Notice it got added to my page. So now this is allowing the user, me being the user of the site, to actually add some data to the database, and this will persist. This is not like temporary. This is actually in my database. If I want to validate that, I could go back to the admin panel, go to questions, and notice that what is the worst season is a new record in my database. Any questions about how we got that to happen? So again, we add a form to our page. That form will submit a post request when they hit add question. On the server side, we look for a post request. And if we get a post request, we should have access to the data from that form to kind of do what we want. Questions? I'm going to pause here for a little bit. Elon.
Sorry, you might have went over this already. Do you mind clarify the the ve.message ticker again? Sorry.
Yeah, so this is, we're looking for a validation error. So this will raise a validation error if something in our model was invalid. So full clean is going to do the checks just like we did for our past challenge. That will raise a validation error. This validation error object just has a message dictionary that's going to contain every single error with the input. In this case, we only have one field in our model, right? If you look at our models, we only have one field here. But if we had like 12 different fields and the user was entering 12 different values, that message dictionary would have an error for every single value that is incorrect. So let's say we had first name, last name, and question, and they didn't add a last name or a question. We would have two entries in that message dictionary, one for the last name field, the other for the question field saying, hey, this value cannot be blank. So again, that's something automatically from validation error. This is nothing I'm creating or making up. Message dictionary is just an attribute on a validation error instance. And it contains a summary of all the errors that resulted from full clean.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so we got that CRUDing. So we did the C part of CRUDing, which is creating new data. Let's actually get to the question detail page. Courtney?
Where is the my data, like on line 15? Where is that on the HTML page?
My data, this is the dictionary I created right here. Yep, so that's what I'm ultimately passing to my template.
Awesome, thanks.
Yep, cool. All right, so let's get to our question detail page. We're gonna maybe do some CRUDing there, but question detail, we're just gonna show the question, allow the user to enter in some values, and then, enter in a vote, and we'll do something there. So I'm gonna do something similar, create my data. And then we want to return render the requests object, the template we want to return to the user. So that's gonna be question detail is a new page I'll create. And then we're gonna pass it some data that it may want to use. My data. All right, so for this case, again, for a question detail, we have a particular question that we want to show. So in this case, I'm going to add to my data. Let's call that question. And then the value is going to be a query question.objects.get, because we know there's going to be one record that matches this ID. I'm going to say primary key equals question ID. One thing I want to point out here, because it might be a little confusing, PK is like a magic alias that refers to a primary key of your model. This is not actually a field that exists. ID is actually the field that exists. That is the primary key. So you might sometimes see ID equals something, or you might see primary key equals something. It's doing the same thing. Just know that PK is like a alias for whatever the primary key field is. In this case, the primary key field is ID. So you put either or. It's going to work the same. So I'm going to look for an object that has ID of question ID, get that, store that in my dictionary, and then that'll be passed along to my template. Okay, so now I need to create a question detail page. So that shouldn't be too much more work. Question detail.html. And just to make our lives a little quicker, I'm going to copy and paste the question detail. I believe some of this is on our curriculum page. So we have a title. We also want a header. This is the question page. That's the question. Okay, so kind of summarize what I copied and pasted here. We're going to show a form. That form is going to have some radio buttons. So we'll see kind of how these look, but it's basically going to list all the choices. So here, the question object has a choices field on it. If you remember, if you go back to our model, this is that kind of imaginary field that shows up when we create this foreign key. So now that we have a single question object, we have access to choices from the question record. So in my question detail page, I'm doing question, which is what we pass into our dictionary. We have access to choices from that record, and I'm doing .all and sorting it so that it's going to be sorted by ID. The reason I'm doing this is because anytime you update a value, it's going to change the sorting order based on the last updated record. In this case, I just want to keep it by the ID. So basically, we're doing a for loop over the choices, creating inputs, being radio buttons, and that's going to be kind of how the user can vote here. The form is submitted by the vote button, and that's going to send a post to our question detail page. All right, and I also have an edit question button here. I need to create this, but I'm gonna comment that out for now. So I don't get any errors. All right, let's see how this page looks. So again, this is our question detail page. Our URL for that should be /question, and then the question ID that's being detailed, I guess. So let's see if this works. So I'm gonna go here, refresh. I guess I don't wanna resubmit. Okay, so let's click on a question. Let's go to what is the best dessert? Okay, so we got no reverse question edits. How did you get there? How did it find it? I commented this out, yet it still found it. That is not what I want.
That's the issue I got too, is that anytime you comment it, I guess Jinja still believes it for some reason.
Oh, because there's Jinja has its own commenting. I think I remember now. I don't remember the syntax. Let me quickly look it up, even though it's not important. Jinja comments. Inline comments. Okay, we need curly braces hashtag. Yeah, I forgot that Jinja has their own. Hopefully that does it. Jinja, please work with me. There we go. All right, so this is what our page looks like. Notice we're also showing the votes here. So donuts have 0 votes, ice cream has 0 votes. But this is our question page. We have a question and the choices for that question, and we can also vote here. Now, obviously, if we hit the vote button, nothing's going to actually happen because again, the vote is going to send a post request to this page, and my view handler right now does not care about post. It's going to treat every request as a get because there's nothing dealing with the post here. So let's change that. We're going to do the same thing here, where we're going to spy on the request method and see if we actually have something that's a post. If we do, we want to update some of our data. So in this case, we want to update our vote count. So for example, if I selected donuts here and I hit vote, it should update the vote count in our database and also on the front end here to show that we voted for donuts. So we want to capture the item that was selected, increment the votes, and save that in our database. That's what we're doing for this post. We need to keep in mind how we access this data. So if you look at our template file, the value is the ID of the choice. So that is how I'm going to extract which choice was selected. So my key is choice, and the value will be the ID of the choice. That's how radio button is going to work. So if I go to views, and then we have a post. All right, so we don't want to create a new question. We don't even want to create a new choice. A choice already exists. So this is where we need to get the choice ID from our form. So I'm going to get it from the request.post objects. And then the name of this field was choice. Again, this is matching this name right here. All right, so I named this field choice. Therefore, I extract the value via the name choice from the post dictionary. I get the choice ID that was selected. Then I want to find that choice from my database. So I'll do choice.objects.get. And then we want ID equals choice ID. We want to take that choice and increment the votes count. So do plus equals 1. It's only one vote one at a time. So you increment the votes. We want to do a full clean. Like maybe we have a vote limit. Who knows? There's restrictions we can add later. And then we want to save that choice. If we get an error, great. Our accept statement here will handle that error and they'll report it back to our question detail page. All right, so again, if we get a post, we grab the selected choice, find the choice from our database, update the vote count, and then save it back to the database. All right, let's see if this actually works. So I'm going to save this, let my server refresh. All right, so we want to vote for something. Let's vote for donuts. So I'm going to hit votes. Notice that updated to 1 vote. If I vote again for donuts, great, we're up to 2 votes. We can vote for mochi. There we go. So the post is being honored. We send a post request, comes in here. We find out the choice that was selected. Again, this is coming from HTML. The radio button will tell us which one was selected. We get the ID back because I set the ID as the value for my radio buttons. So again, we're going to have choice 1, 2, or 3, or whatever the ID is for that choice. That's what the radio button is going to send back to me for the value. So that's what's being done right here. I know we're going a little fast. I want to take a pause here. Anything that's unclear about the CRUDing that's going on here. So in this case, we're not creating new data. We're updating existing data. In this case, the vote tally for an existing choice.
How is the page getting updated?
Yeah, so good question. When you hit the vote button, a few things happens. The page automatically will refresh because you're sending a push request to this page. So a refresh is happening to your page. If you kind of notice, like you can maybe detect it when I hit vote. Oops. When I hit vote, you can kind of see that my browser refreshes. I don't know if you guys can catch that, but it's actually reloading my page. So I can't keep sending choice here, but that's fine. Okay, so yeah, this page does refresh, it reloads, it reruns this code with this part executed because it got a post request with that refresh.
But you don't need to return anything?
Well, so this is what's, yeah, so good question. I think I glazed over that. We're gonna run this and we're gonna run this. So a get request will only do this part. A post request,
right.
all of this. So we're kind of doing a post and a get. We're sending the data, saving it, and then also showing the data back, which is the get request. So all of this happens for the post, not just this part. Sorry, I was being kind of lazy about that, but yeah. Okay, cool. So that is showing some data. The last thing I want to do was create the question edit page. And I think we have enough time for it. So let's kind of get to that. So it's going to be very similar. My data is going to be empty dictionary to start off. I'm going to render something, return render a request object. And please ask any questions if there are any, because I know we're going a little fast, but also want this to be a good full review. So question edits is what I'm going to call that page, HTML. My data looks pretty much the same as before. I want to create my route for it. So that's the third route I'll add here. Question ID, I'm going to say edit as that route. Will be handled by the question edit route handler, and the name of this route will be question edit. Very good naming, be consistent. I need to add a template. So let's add a new template and call it question detail.html. Oops, not detail, edits. All right, this is actually gonna look very similar to my detail page. So I'm gonna just copy my detail page and drop that in my question edit page. Well, there's gonna be a few differences. We don't want a form, we do want a form, but they're not gonna have options for the choices. So in the interest of time, I'm gonna enter in my form that I've coded up before. And we'll talk about what I'm doing. So for this edit page, I want to allow the user to edit the question. So let's say they made a typo in the question or they just want to change it. They should be able to edit the question. And I'm going to allow them to update the choices for the question. Now keep in mind, these are two different data models. Choices does not belong within questions. It's associated with questions. But this one form is going to allow me to change the question or any of the choices associated with the question. All right, there are some extra things here. If you guys are curious, we could talk about that, or I will post my code somewhere, because I assume it's going to be beneficial at for someone. But this input type hidden allows me to kind of submit multiple forms. I don't think it's being used right now, but I'm going to glaze over that. But for now, I do want to see what this page is doing. Let's add a header. We have a header, say question edit page. Question. All right, so let's take a look at what this form looks like. Hopefully I have not missed a piece. So if I go back to my question detail page, I need to uncomment this link. So this button should let me go to the question edit route, and that should take me to the question edit page eventually. So let's see if this works or if I skip the step. Refresh, nope, don't want to resubmit. Okay, so we have this edit question button. That should take us to the edit question page, assuming I didn't forget a step. All right, I did forget a step. Question edit got it uninspected. Oh. So again, my fault, but that's fine. Reading errors are fine. We are sending question ID to the review handler. How's that being done? If you remember, our URL is specifying that we have a question ID that we're going to send to our view handler. But if I look at my view handler question edit in my views, notice that this is not taking in that question ID. So Python, you must accept the parameter. It's not JavaScript where you can ignore it. So I need question ID here, even though I'm not using it right now. I guess I need that in my data. So I'm gonna do the same thing I was doing before. So we get a question ID from the URL. We look up that question in our database and then pass it to our template page. So now, if I can refresh this page, there we go. So this is what my initial question was. I can edit the question and then also edit the choices. I don't want to see this here, so I'm going to get rid of that. Where is that? Question edits. I don't want to see what the original question was. Okay, so this is how I can edit my page now, right? So I have the header. I have the ability to, what is the best dessert? Let's say, what is the worst dessert? Maybe change it up. Let's say green beans would be a terrible dessert. Now this is not going to reset my counters. That's the thing. I'm not creating any new choices. I'm updating choices. So this is not maybe the best example, but whatever. Green beans. What else? Disgusting. I hate eggplants. I'm sorry. Artichokes. Not a fan. Sorry if I'm breaking any hearts out there. What else? I'm sure there's something else I hate. Anyone else hate something they?
Durian.
What is it?
Brussels sprouts.
Brussels sprouts. All right. Cool. Basically, vegetables are not good desserts. That makes sense. All right. So hit update question. Nothing's going to happen right now. I could show you, but hopefully you guys believe me because we are not processing this data. So we need to do the same thing for our question edit page. We need to spy and see if we actually have a post. We need to do something appropriately if we do have a post. For this post, we want to do some logic here. So we want to try, just in case we get any errors, and then accept. If we do get any errors, it's going to look the same as this. Now let's make sure we grab all the pieces from our form. Again, half the battle is knowing what the form is actually sending you. So if I go back to question edit, I'm going to get one field that's named question. And my for loop is doing something a little tricky. I'm creating individual fields named choice dash, and then the ID of the actual choice. So I'm going to need some extra work to figure out what choice value I'm actually getting or updating. But that's the naming format I've done. It's choice dash and the actual ID of the choice. So on my view handler side, I'm going to find the question. So in fact, I'm going to copy what I had above here. Actually, I can't do that. So sorry. I want question ID is going to be question. Say Q equals question dot objects dot get, and I have the question ID sent to me, so that's easy enough. I'm going to do ID equals question ID. All right, that gives me my question. If I want to update the question, I should be able to do the same thing that I did here. Okay, so I get the question text from the form. I do a full clean and save it. So that's the question. Now I have to do the choices. Choices get a little trickier, but we should be able to go through every item in our post dictionary and figure out if that is actually a choice based on our naming scheme. So we do for key, let's say for field in this dictionary. Alignment, I saw you had your hand up. Question while I type this.
Oh yeah, I was just curious if you could use PK instead of ID when you were assigning when you're looking for.
Yep, you can use PK here. It's going to do the same thing. So either or. I'm going to use regex here. So we learned about regex like a few weeks ago. Definitely a good tool to have because in this case it becomes kind of handy. We're not going to do a regex tutorial or a recap here, but essentially what I'm going to look for is, does my field name match choice dash and some number? Because that is the naming pattern I chose on the front on the HTML page. So I'm going to look for a match. So I'm going to do re.search. I want to look for the pattern in the field name. I need to import regular expressions, so I'm using that module. So here again, I'm trying to match, going through all the fields in my dictionary and trying to match to make sure I'm actually looking at a choice. Because again, in this dictionary, you're going to have question. You're also going to have that CRF token is a member of this dictionary. I don't care about that stuff. I only care about choices that I've set. So if we get a match, we can proceed to update that choice. We do C equals choice dot objects dot get. our ID is going to be this group right here. So I know this is a regex tutorial, but group number 1 will be the ID of the choice. So if we get a match, our first group here will be the ID. So I could do get ID equals match.group1, and that'll be just the ID part. It would not be this part right here. So remember, grouping is with parentheses and regex. You guys can recap regex if you need to. Choice text is going to be from my dictionary. So request dot post, and we get the field. So field is what we're looking for. So again, this is a key. We're using that key to get the value of our dictionary. And then we want to do c dot full clean, make sure it's valid. And then we want to save that particular choice. We'll do that for every single choice that we go through. All right, in this case, my edit page wants to redirect. So I'm going to redirect. This is a built-in function from Django, so I need to import it. Looks like Django or VS Code automatically did that for me. Also going to add reverse here. So my redirect is going to say, hey, let's go back to another view. So I'm going to say reverse back to question detail. That question got updated. Detail is the view name or the route name, and the arguments it takes are question ID. Question ID should not change when we update the question text. So again, this is how we redirect. This is one of many ways to redirect. Using the reverse function, we pass it the route name and the arguments that that route should be capturing. So now when we save this, we should be redirected to the question detail page. Let's see if this works, or if I goofed and made something an error. Server seems okay. Let's go back to the very beginning. Let's add a new question. Let's go to what is the worst season. Notice we have nothing to vote on right now. So we need to add some choices for that. Let's add some choices quickly. Add choice for what is the worst season. We got winter, 0 votes. We got spring, that's upcoming, less than a week away, I think. And then a couple more. We got summer and autumn or fall. So fall, 0, and whoops, not dessert, question. Okay, so we got our data. That should be automatically good to go. So if I refresh this page, hey, there we go. Let's go to edit question. Let's say I want to make this autumn instead of fall, right? Some people call it autumn. So I make this autumn and maybe change my question to what is your worst season? I don't know. So this will update my question and hopefully update that one choice. The rest of the choices will get saved again, but whatever. So update question. There we go. We're back. We have autumn now instead of fall. Okay, we can still vote for these. If I pick spring, all right, we got one vote for spring. Winter, definitely a worse season for me. Keep voting for that. Cool. We could obviously style this up. So I know you guys don't care about CSS styling, but I think this looks kind of ugly. So let's get practice of adding CSS styling. Add a new folder to my app. I'm going to call it CSS, or sorry, static. It must be called static. In that, I'm going to create a folder called CSS. In that, I'm going to create a file called styles.css. I think I got 2-click happy there. So again, static must be the name of the folder, much like templates must be the name of your folder. Migrations must be the name of that folder. Just follow Django's expected patterns. Styles.css is my style sheet. And I have some styles that I created. It's not going to be super amazing, so don't expect too much, but always nice to add some minimal styling so that you're not looking at a naked page. So there's my styles. Let's see if this actually works. Bring down my server. Okay, I don't know if these styles actually will work, but let's see. Let's go to our homepage. Okay, so that's, my header, kind of large. Make that smaller. Okay, so we got some new fonts, some not really exciting coloring, but if I go to the advantage is I'm using a base template. So if I go to what is your worst season, notice that the styling is kind of consistent because I have that base template, added some coloring for the voting so I can kind of see the differences. Let's vote for summer. Can get too hot. All right, cool. So here we've showed CRUDing. We've showed the ability to create new data, ability to update data. We've seen that twice with the vote and also the edit question. I'm going to do one more. I know we're running up against lunch, but I want to do the delete case. Like, what if we want to delete data? It's the same operation. We need a form. We need some mechanism for the user to say, hey, make a change. So I'm going to actually do that on my homepage right over here. Let's say I want to delete these questions. I want to give the user the option to delete questions. How can I implement that? This gets a little tricky, especially because I already have a form on here, but we still should be able to do it if we're kind of sneaky about it. And this is where that hidden input will come into play. So apologies if this is kind of like a little too crazy, but I want to kind of show ability to delete. So on my homepage, I want to allow users to delete questions. So these are the questions being listed. What if I want them to delete it? So here I'm going to add a form. So I'm going to nest the form in this tag. I'm going to say form method is going to be post. Post is our only option. There's no delete method for forms. There's a HTTP delete method, but not a form delete method. So here I'm going to sneak in a form really quickly if you guys let me. Got my CRF token. I'm going to nest my link in there too, so I don't break a line. Okay, so this form has a button and a hidden field. Why do I have a hidden field? Because I'm trying to pass some data to the backend server, but that's not something the user is going to input. So I have type equals hidden, so it's not a field that the user is going to see. I'm going to add a delete button for each question, and then the value of that hidden field is going to be the question I want to delete. So again, this is being a little sneaky, but with this hidden field, I know exactly which question needs to be deleted when they hit submit. So if I go to my view handler, I'm going to need to change my code a little bit, because now this is my question list page currently. When I get a post, I'm assuming that I'm going to add a question. But now a post might mean add a question or delete a question. I need to distinguish between both of those. So I can't just assume I'm going to add a question. I need to actually look for further data. And this is where that hidden field is going to be useful. So what if I create a new value and say add or delete? And this is going to be dependent on if delete question is not in, let's just say do delete is in request.post. So I want to make sure I'm not going too fast, even though I'm going pretty fast. I'm going to search for a field called delete question in this dictionary. That field will exist if I look at my form here. This field will only exist from this form. If I submit this form down here to add a question, I'm not going to have a field called delete question. So this hidden field is letting me know on the backside if I'm actually deleting something. If this field exists in my form, then I know this was a delete operation. If this field doesn't exist, it's going to be the add operation from before. So here I might do if do delete, do our delete action, else we're going to do our create action. All right, so do delete, we need to figure out the ID. Luckily, the ID is kind of nested, nested in that hidden field. So I could do something like request dot post, get that hidden field, which was named delete question, that has a value. Again, just to reiterate, I know I'm bouncing around a lot. The value of the hidden field is the actual question ID that I want to delete. That's what QID is going to offer me. So here I get the ID that I want to delete, and I simply do question dot objects dot delete. Sorry, get, I think is what I want. ID equals question to delete, and then delete that out of our database. All right, so this will delete it. This will still add it depending on whatever value I get from the form. So let's see how this looks. So I go back to my home page, refresh. Somehow that got smaller. All right, so notice I have these delete buttons now. So if I click on this this button right here, question number 2 will be the ID, value 2, or whatever the ID of this question is, will be the value sent to through my form. And then on my backside, I'll be like, all right, cool. Question 2 was the button you clicked. Let's delete that question. So if I actually hit delete, get rid of this really long question, delete, notice it got dropped. It actually got removed from my database. If I want to prove that, I go back to my questions. Notice it's no longer listed as one of my questions. So that is the full spectrum of CRUDing. We show that we can create data by doing an add. We add some new data. We create a new object. So this is a brand new object. We capture the user value and then save it. But we also do existing values. For example, when we're voting on choices, the choice already exists here. I'm not creating a new choice right here. I'm getting the existing choice and updating some data on it. So that's the updating, the U part of CRUDing. And then we just saw we can delete by specifying, hey, what's the ID you need to delete? You don't need any extra information than the ID of what you need to delete. And then you just delete it from your database. So that's C for creating, R for reading. We've done reading data often, updating and deleting. That's our CRUD app right here. A couple questions, and then we'll get you off to lunch. So John Winko, question?
So instead of doing the individual form elements for each one of the deletes, so would it be better just to have an URL route for deleting that one item and just passing that on a link?
Yes, you could do that too. So my design here is not always a typical design. I'm doing the form processing and the form submitting on the same page. That is not always the case. Often forms will redirect to a new page. That new page will process it and then maybe redirect you somewhere else. So yeah, you could send this ID to some other location so that you don't have to have multiple posts that had to detect both an add and delete. Yeah, that is an option. Andrew Tran.
When you click delete there, so you had 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yep.
I really thought it was going to show 1, 3, and 4. Why did it show?
Yeah.
Why did it do that? Because I'm thinking about databases and primary keys, because I remembered like the primary key will say the same, right?
Yep. Yeah. So this question is primary key 1. This question is primary key 3. And this question is primary key 4. The value here is simply from the ordered list. So that's an HTML thing. It's not the actual ID. So if you remember what our template looked like in template list, that's just coming from ordered lists. That does not care about the primary key. And typically speaking, your users do not and should not care about primary keys. So regardless of what the IDs are for these values in my database, the user should not and will not care about the IDs. You should never expose IDs. You're going to expose text or any other values, but the ID is never relevant to the user. Okay, cool. Marcos?
When you delete the question, the choices for the question, do those still stay in the choices database then? They're just unconnected from anything?
Great question. So the answer here is going to be no. Sorry, they're going to be deleted. The reason, and this is I'm glad you asked this because I feel like we haven't talked about this enough. The reason is I've chosen that this relationship will delete associated choices if the question gets deleted. That's what cascade means. So again, there are different types. Let's actually just do a quick Google. Cascade is one of them. Restrict is another one. Django models. All right, let's see if Stack Overflow gives us any options. Okay, so these are other options. You can set to null, which means if the parent gets deleted, just wipe out the relationship here. So if I said models, I think there should be null. Yeah, set null, set default. If I do set null, this will say, hey, if my parent question gets deleted, just make this field null. If I make it cascade, it's going to delete this record. If I say restrict here, let's actually try this. So I'm going to say restrict. This is going to prevent me from deleting a parent that has any choices that are depending on it. So if I save this, I'm probably going to need to update my database. So let's migrate, please. All right. Python manage.py, make migrations and migrate. Sorry, it's a good question, so that's why I want to spend a couple minutes on it if you guys don't mind. But restrict means do not let me delete it. So let's actually try this. Maybe I'm lying to you, who knows? So now that we have, let's hopefully we don't delete all of our questions. Let's, worst season has some choices. Okay. All right, server. Server got taken down by myself. All right, server's back up. Go back here. All right, so we have these choices that exist for this question. Let's try to delete what is your worst season. Let's see what happens. The database should yell at me. That's what I'm expecting, but I'm not sure. So what is the worst season? Let's actually delete it from this side. I guess we delete it from here. It should make a difference. Let's delete it from here. What is the worst season deletes? Notice we got an error. Cannot delete some instances of model question. There you go. This is exactly what I expect. The restrict says, hey, there's some records that depend on you. You're not allowed to go anywhere. That is your choice as a developer, what you want to enforce. Normally, again, I prefer Cascade. Cascade will say, delete everything associated with it. So if I do Cascade here, refresh my server. All right, almost done with this example. I know you guys want to get to lunch. I do too. Okay, kick back our server. All right, so with Cascade, good question you asked. Let's actually see it happen. So if I go to home page, so this question is still here and it didn't get deleted because the database prevented us from deleting it. Let's actually click delete now. Okay, got deleted. What happened to my choices? We had autumn, spring, summer, fall. They don't exist anymore because that cascade, if you know, kind of understand the definition of cascade, like a cascading waterfall, it's going to flow into all dependent models and do the same action. John Winko.
This is less about CRUD and more, I guess, about Django. But as we start adding more and more and more stuff into the view for the logic, we need to abstract or reflect that out. Do just we create more views and have includes, or do we create classes to handle some more of the logic? How is that normally handled as we grow in scope?
So the question was, do you just dump everything in views, or do you create like standalone files? Is that
kind of sort of? I mean, do we kind of create more of an inheritance model with views upon views, or is it more where we take it out and handle like an API handle a portion of it? Because I mean, we've only got 3 routes. And we're already a page and a half in. I can't imagine a full-fledged application how that would be handled.
Right. So this is where, file organization becomes very important. So your core files have to remain. You must have models.py, views.py, urls.py, and admin.py. Whatever is existing here should remain the same. But going off of John's point, there's nothing stopping me from creating a new file and importing it here. So if I said like, extra views.py, whatever, that's fine. I mean, this is what you should be thinking about. As John's saying, this file is getting very large. It gets kind of hard to maintain a super long file, even though we're only like 60, 70 lines. I've seen files that are like 500, maybe 1,000 lines long. That it gets kind of unwieldy. So always break it down. Like I might have one view handler here, some view handler, whatever. And then I would import this into my views.py. So this views.py is still the main file, but I can import whatever I want and should be fine. Yeah, file organization, definitely be mindful of it, especially as your projects grow and scale. You'll be tempted to kind of just create more files to organize it. All right, any other questions? I know that was a lot to cover in like an hour, 15 minutes, but hopefully it was beneficial. I want to have a good review of understanding how we can create a full CRUDing app with this example here. All right, I'm assuming it's going to take a while to digest. I'll upload my code and make it available because I know it's not fully on the curriculum page. If there's any questions during stand down, bring them to stand down. There's a social activity this afternoon. I guess I don't need to report this.